Okay, let me show you how the battles play out. This is going to be a general overview. The battles are fought between enemies and heroes. These markers represent the enemies, and these are the sample hero markers. The hit points of heroes are represented by hit point tokens, which are placed near the character sheets. The enemy hit points are represented by number of tokens on one enemy stack. So one stack of tokens is one enemy, and the number of tokens represents the number of hit points this enemy has. And one token represents 2 hit points. If an enemy takes one hit, one of those tokens is flipped to the other side, and this broken token represents 1 hit point. So basically now this enemy has 5 hit points left. Of course, if either the hero or an enemy is brought to 0 hit points, he is eliminated from the battle. Position is represented in an abstract way. Heroes always start distant to the enemies, and characters may be either distant or adjacent to each other. So now the paladin and the mage is adjacent to each other, they form a group, and this enemy is distant to this group. Moving means changing groups or moving out of the group. So basically this enemy, if he's to move to the mage, he would join this group, and now every character in this group is adjacent to each other. Now, for example, the paladin could move out of this group to create a new distant group. If a hero is adjacent to an enemy, he is considered engaged, and if a hero is adjacent to the twice the number of enemies than the heroes in this particular group, the heroes are considered surrounded. So now the mage is surrounded, but if the paladin moved to this group, no heroes would be surrounded, because it would require 4 enemies to surround 2 heroes. Damage is dealt in combat, and when the damage is dealt, if a hero or an enemy has armor, the amount of damage is reduced by that armor. But a hero or an enemy can also be shielded, which means he has one of those shield markers, 1 or more, on his token. And shields are separate from the armor. They're removed before the damage is reduced by armor. So if, let's say, the mage would deal 3 damage to this character, and this character had 1 armor, first 2 points of shield would be removed, and then the remaining 1 damage would be absorbed by the armor of this character, and no damage would be dealt. Characters can also be exposed, which means they have 1 or more of those expose markers on their tokens. And underneath those exposed markers there are different possible negative effects. For example, +1 damage or push back effect. I will not get into detail now. However, I'm just going to say that the shield markers and the exposed markers come into play from the effects of different abilities. Okay, so let's make the setup for the battle. For 2 players we need 3 minions, which means we need 3 stacks of tokens, 6 HP each. So basically 3 tokens in 3 stacks. And each of those enemies will have 1 armor. If the enemy had any special abilities, it would be listed on the bottom section of the card, but this particular enemy does not have any special abilities. Okay, so this is our setup. We've got 2 heroes who are distant from each other, and they must start distant to the enemies. Enemies during setup are paired by default, so I had to pair 2 of those enemies into 1 group, and the second one obviously couldn't be paired. As you may remember, the heroes started the battle with 2 shield markers each, so I'm going to place 2 shield markers on each of the heroes. These markers are removed at the end of each round, so those markers would provide some protection for the heroes during the first round. Okay, let's have a look at our heroes, but before we start, let me tell you in general about the round sequence. Basically, every round, at the start of the round, players will roll dice equal the number of ability cards they have. They may roll, and they may reroll 2 times, keeping any dice results. So basically I may decide to keep those 2 results and roll the rest, and keep those results and decide to reroll one of the others. And this is my final reroll. These are the dice I have to keep. So now players will be trying to assign their dice results to abilities that match the dice result printed on the card. Basically, I could use this ability with a 3 and an attack with a 6, and I could use another move here with a 3, the 4. I can use the spellbook with that, and I cannot use the 2 because I've got no abilities that use the 2, so this die is pretty much wasted. Once the roll phase is finished, the round starts, and players who have abilities with a lightning symbol, which means initiative enabled, may use those abilities before the enemies move. After that, the enemies will perform their moves, and after enemy moves, players may use the remaining abilities which do not have the lightning symbol. When using an ability, players will physically remove the dice from the card and resolve the text of the card once. The little rune symbols here indicate how many times during a round the card may be activated, so the mage can shoot only one ray of doom during a single round. Let's go back to the roll phase for a second. During a roll phase, apart from assigning dice to the abilities, players may discard 6 results and 1 result. 1 result is a defensive roll and 6 result is a heroic roll. And players may discard a 6 to gain a heroism marker and discard a 1 to gain a shield marker. The shield marker goes on the character token, and the heroism marker may be used to power up the abilities. For example, if I've used the Ray of Doom, I could also, during the activation of this ability, spend any number of heroism markers to improve the ability's effect. For example, here I can use 1 heroism to improve the damage dealt by this ability by 1. Okay, so basically every action during battles come from these ability cards. So the roll phase is sort of like a planning phase where characters need to communicate and decide what they're going to do. Are they going to be aggressive, or are they going to get some shields and maybe activate some defensive abilities? Are they going to move? It's up to the players to decide in the roll phase. Okay, so let's have a look at the mage and all of his abilities. He's got the maneuver, which is the exact same kind for each other character. This is a basic move ability. If they activate this card, they can perform a move, so move to a group or out of a group. And additionally, instead of moving, they may decide to gain 1 heroism. However, this ability does not work in initiative, so they may not use it before the enemies move. The Ray of Doom is a basic attack for the mage. It deals a lot of damage, but requires a 6 result, and it ignores 1 armor. Also, it may be powered up by heroism, like I told you before. The spellbook gives the mage a lot of options. It may be activated twice, it may be used in initiative, requires a 4 result, and there are 3 options for the spellbook. The first one is it enables 1 ability in initiative, so basically if the mage uses the spellbook, he may decide, for example, to enable maneuver in initiative or Ray of Doom, which will allow him to use this ability before the enemies activate. The second option is to rotate a die result to an opposite side, and the mage can also do that to his fellow party members. Quite useful during roll phase. And this final ability is to reduce the threat of the mage by 3. The threat value is indicated in the upper right corner of the character card, and this indicates how much enemies want to attack this character. So basically, the higher the number, the more enemies will attack this character, and the mage is pretty high. So in a sense, this final ability is a defensive ability. He could reduce his threat below other party members, so the other party members are more likely to get attacked. The Garlic Breath is another attack, and additional to the damage dealt, it also pushes the character back. So if the mage uses Garlic Breath on that enemy will be dealt 2 damage and pushed back into a new group. The final ability is the Parry, which is a defensive ability. It can be activated with a 1, and remember that 1 can be used to obtain shield markers during roll phase, and the shield markers prevent 1 damage during a single round. However, the Parry is a better option because if the mage was attacked and had a 1 prepared on this card, he could activate this ability as a reaction and decide to gain 1 shield, so the same he would get for discarding this 1 dice earlier, but also he would receive 1 heroism. And remember that heroism can be used to power up abilities. For example, it can be used to power the Ray of Doom. So basically, we would want a scenario where the mage prevents the damage with his parry, and then after the enemy moves, he activates his Ray of Doom for a more powerful effect. Remember that we had 2 items or 3 items we acquired during the adventure mode, and mage has received 2 of those items. One of the items is an armor, which should actually go in the armor slot. And the second item is an artifact and a consumable, which means it can be equipped in any of the slots. So let's have a look at the armor. It had a requirement of 1 intelligence, and the statistic of a hero is equal to the number of ability cards with the appropriate statistics. So basically the mage started with 2 intelligence, and he also received the parry, which is an agility ability. So he could equip this rope no problem. The effect of the rope is to rotate any die result to 1, which is good for the mage. If he had any dice he couldn't assign at the end of roll phase, for example at 2, he could rotate it to 1 and use his parry ability. And the grenade may be used to deal damage to an entire group of characters, and that damage cannot be prevented, and the character term refers to both heroes and enemies, so if heroes are in a group with enemies, they would all be dealt 1 damage. Basically, consumable items may be used at any time during a round. Let's have a look at the trait. The mage received the stinky trait. All the traits are basically a positive thing and a negative thing, and also they give an extra ability, which was the garlic breath. Basically, with the stinky trait, if enemies ever move adjacent to the mage, they would receive an expose marker from the expose marker pool. The mage has to be the active player, though we will explain that later. So this is a good thing, and I must say this is a really good thing for this particular encounter. But the stinky trait also has the negative thing, which is at the end of round he would deal 1 damage to 1 of the adjacent heroes. So basically the mage wants to stay distant to the paladin. Let's have a look at the paladin. He has the same exact maneuverability as the mage. That's the basic move ability. His melee attack is one of the most powerful single target abilities in the game. It can be activated with either 5 or a 6, and it can be activated only once during a round. And the basic effect is only 1 damage, but the heroism effect increases the damage by 2, which is quite powerful. Also, this effect pushes the enemies back just like garlic breath does. This helps the paladin to not be surrounded, because his third ability, the battle heal, requires the paladin to not be surrounded, so not be adjacent to double the enemies than the current hero in the group. I think the battle heal works just like you'd imagine. It restores hit points, so if the paladin had 4 hit points because he took damage earlier, he could heal himself or other party members. The trick is that the healed hit points are returned on the broken side, which in battle doesn't matter, but they will be discarded at the end of the battle. Okay, the Rainbow Blast is the ability from the trait, and it's a really good ability for placing expose markers on adjacent enemies. It also works in initiative. This ability could get very handy in this encounter. You can see the Bloodlust over here has a little lock symbol near the die. This means that 1 die may be placed during roll phase on this card, and then the effect on the card becomes a passive effect that immediately starts to work. Also, the thing with locked dice is that each round every player has to collect all of his dice from abilities, but the locked dice may remain on this card, providing a lasting passive ability. And what it does, basically, it increases the damage of the paladin's melee attack. And now when I think about it, it's not such an awesome ability for the paladin, because the paladin can attack only once per round, and a class like a rogue who can attack with his basic ability 3 times may benefit more from this ability. Still, there is this is an ability with a 4, and no other abilities have that result, which means if a 4 was rolled, well, the paladin can place this die here and it wouldn't be wasted. The paladin received a weapon of the Fight Club, and it may be used once per round to add an expose marker to the enemy that was just attacked. And this expose marker is placed after the attack. This party is pretty strong when it comes to exposing enemies, and it will be interesting how the party would develop, because I'd say that's a strong point for this party. And also single target abilities, because both the mage and the paladin can attack only once per round, but the attacks are pretty strong. Okay, finally let's have a look at the epileptic trait. The Rainbow Blast came from this trait, and let me start with the negative thing. Basically, whenever this character, an adjacent hero, uses a magic ability, the paladin will receive an expose marker. And unfortunately for the paladin, the Rainbow Blast is a magic type of ability. Also, Ray of Doom is a magic type of ability. So the mage, if the mage used Ray of Doom near the paladin would receive an expose marker. The good thing is that both the mage and the paladin will stay away from each other anyway, because the mage is stinky and the paladin is epileptic, so they're better off just staying far away from each other. Which could be a problem, because when characters are together they're not so easily surrounded, and the paladin has this ability where he can use only when he is not surrounded. He can deal with that though by pushing enemies back with his Holy Smite. Okay, let me quickly explain the good thing coming from the epileptic trait. Basically, if the paladin has 3 or more expose markers, he may decide to discard those markers, but he has to reveal one of those markers and suffer its effect. So basically now, if he chooses to discard those markers, he would suffer the effect of the push back. He would push out of the group. And remember that one of those results is a damage, so he could damage as a result of this passive ability. But there's a big reward for doing so, for discarding those 3 markers and suffering one of those effects. The paladin would receive a heroism marker. Okay, so let's play a couple of rounds. Hopefully we can finish this battle in one video. We'll start off by rolling dice in the roll phase, and during the roll phase players would roll their dice simultaneously, so there would be a lot of discussion regarding who is going to do what. For example, oh no, I don't have a move ability, can somebody bring those enemies to me so I can attack them with my melee? Or I'm going to hit really hard this round, cover me. Or crap, I'm not going to do anything, I'm just defending this round. Somebody exposed this enemy so I can attack him harder. Okay, this is my first roll. I've got 2 4s, which is not so good. I guess I'm going to keep one on the Bloodlust, and I'm going to use the 5 on my Holy Smite. I may have to use a maneuver this round, so I'll keep this 3 as well. I don't think I need healing in the first round. Let's play it aggressively and not use healing, so I'm going to reroll those 2 dice. Okay, another 3 and a 2. I guess I'm going to finish my rolling now. I could reroll 3rd time any of those dice, but I'm going to keep those results, keep that 1 heal, and use the 3 on the maneuver, because maneuver can be also used to gain heroism, and the heroism is really good for the paladin as he can increase his damage by 2. Meanwhile, the mage rolls his dice. Okay, 6 is good for the Ray of Doom, and I don't think I have to move this round, so I'll ignore this 3 and maybe try get some 6s to get some more heroism during initiative. But I will keep this 4 so I can shoot one of the ogres in initiative. Sorry, the beasts. A 1 would be nice also if I wanted to use the parry. Okay, a 6. I'll keep that, and I'm going to roll 1 final time, trying to get some 1. Okay, 2 parries. I don't think I'm going to need 2, but hell, that's my final roll, so I might as well keep them. and I'm going to place those here, and the 6 I'm going to discard to get 1 heroism marker. Very decent rolls. Actually, I'm not going to use the spellbook to shoot Ray of Doom in initiative because I want the enemies to attack me first to gain the heroism from parry and then blow one of the enemies up using heroism. So instead I could use the spellbook to reduce my threat, which doesn't really matter at this point, but I could also rotate one of the dice results to opposite side. Maybe I could rotate this one and have another heroism. I think I'm going to do that. So I'm using the spellbook during the roll phase and rotating the 1 to 6 and discarding the 6 to get 1 heroism. That's only because I thought I was not going to... it's a possibility that I was not going to be attacked twice. Okay, now the roll phase is finished, so players start the round and they may activate their initiative abilities, so the ones with the lightning by the die, and no players use their initiative abilities except for the mage, who throws a grenade at those 2 ogres to take advantage of that they're still grouped together and separate from the heroes. So basically what the grenade does is deals 1 damage, and the damage cannot be prevented. 1 damage here and 1 damage here. Okay, now it's the enemy turn, and during enemy turn each of the heroes has to activate 2 enemies, starting from the highest threat number hero. So the mage is 9, he's the highest, he needs to choose 2 enemies now. These enemies will perform their actions. What he does is he picks this enemy and draws a card for this particular encounter. This is the artificial intelligence deck for this particular encounter. Okay, let's see. Unless engaged, move to highest threat. So this enemy is not engaged, he's moving to the highest threat. The highest threat is of course the mage. And the second part of this is the little sword symbols indicate that this ability is an attack, and the attack deals 1 damage to each adjacent hero. So only the mage is adjacent, so he's dealt 1 damage and is pushed back. The mage could just take the hit and remove 1 shield marker from himself. However, he's performing the reaction with parry. And so he removes the die from the card and activates the ability text, which pretty much gives him a shield, and he's receiving 1 heroism. So he receives the 3rd shield, but this shield is immediately discarded because it absorbs 1 damage. The final part is a battle roar. So the enemy removes an exposed marker if he had any, and he gains 1 shield. So now the mage has to decide to activate a different enemy. Remember that each character has to activate 2 enemies during his turn. So he activates this enemy and draws another card. The first part is, unless engaged, move to active player. Not engaged, and the active player is the one who is currently activating enemies, so the mage again. This beast moves to the mage. Okay, I just remembered that the stinky trait of the mage places an exposed markers whenever enemies move adjacent to the mage, so both this enemy and the other enemy would receive 1 random exposed marker. This is important because the next attack deals 1 damage to the active player, so the mage gets hit again, but the damage would deal 1 damage more if the beast was not exposed. The beast is exposed, so the mage gets only hit by 1 damage. The final effect is remove 1 exposed marker. So like I said before, the stinky trait is very good for this encounter because it exposes the beasts once they approach, and that means that often they will deal 1 less damage because they were exposed. Very good, the mage was dealt no damage. Now it's the paladin's turn to activate 2 enemies. There's just 1 not activated enemy left, so he just has to activate this 1 enemy. Now the paladin is the active player, he draws 1 card for this enemy. This is the same card, so basically the enemy moves to the paladin and deals 2 damage because he's not exposed. However, the paladin has 2 shields, so he just discards those 2 shields. Now the enemy activation is over. The round continues to the player actions, where every ability can be used. Okay, let's have a look at the paladin first. The heal dice placed on the heal turned out to be a bad decision because no heroes were damaged. They started with 2 shields, so I don't know what I was thinking. I'm just going to discard this die without effect. Now what I want to do is use both the maneuvers to gain 2 heroism. I don't need to move because I have one enemy adjacent to me, so I will reach him with my Holy Smite. I will just spend those 2 sixes to use the second effect of the maneuver, which is gain 1 heroism. 2 heroism for the paladin. Finally, I shall attack the beast with Holy Smite, which by default deals 1 damage. However, damage is increased by 1 because I have the Bloodlust ability activated, and I will spend 2 heroism to increase the damage by additional 4. 6 damage total. That's too bad because the beasts have 1 armor, which means they've got 6 hit points and 1 armor, which means the attack would reduce the beast to 1 hit point. And that's a shame because if I had eliminated this beast, he would not. No, there would be less enemies to activate next round. Let's not forget the Fight Club. I'm going to use the Fight Club during this attack to add an expose marker after the attack. So this enemy is almost dead and exposed and pushed back because of the effect of the Holy Smite. Let's get to the mage. He's surrounded, but I don't think he's in trouble. There is a big hit coming from the mage as well. The mage uses his Ray of Doom, and by default it does 3 damage, ignores 1 armor, and spending all the heroism on this attack, adding 3 damage to this attack. So 6 damage total, ignore 1 armor. Let's attack the exposed enemy. I could just attack this one, but I want to show you how the expose markers work. Basically the mage deals 6 damage to this enemy, and this enemy has 5 hit points and 1 armor. It would kill him even with the shield marker over here. So this enemy has 1 exposed marker, but let's, for the sake of example, let's place more exposed markers on himself. He could be exposed by many exposed markers, and when an attack is made, all the exposed markers are flipped, and the result of the exposed markers added to the attack. So basically the mage deals +1 damage with this attack, 7 in total. It kills the beast anyway, and the enemy is pushed back. For example, the damage might not have been sufficient to kill the enemy, but if exposed markers were placed on that enemy earlier, the attacker, the hero, might hope for a +1 damage that would kill the enemy. Anyway, this beast is dead. Okay, so this is the end of the round. All shield markers are discarded, and all the dice are placed off the cards. So all the players now collect their dice, and the paladin may choose to keep this die, this locked die, on the Bloodlust ability to not roll it on the next roll phase. Okay, I think there is no more point continuing this battle. The next round would follow with a roll phase and the similar procedure. This was a pretty easy battle for this party. They were extremely well prepared for this particular encounter. The mage was pretty much immune to the abilities of the beasts because he was exposing them as they approached him. And even if the mage had no ability such as this, the paladin could expose the beasts using Rainbow Blast in initiative. Also, like I said, those 2 characters are also hard single target hitters, and this was a battle about a few tough enemies. So if this party fought the encounter with many enemies, they could get in trouble because they could only activate their abilities once per round, but this could be anticipated during adventure mode, and also there's still a fighting chance if they roll right, and maybe the grenade could be used in a more efficient way. The mage has a second attack. Actually, it's the Garlic Breath, and he would use this second attack to deal some damage to multiple enemies. Thanks a lot for watching. If you're interested in more of this, you can check out the forum threads at Board Game Geek. I'm putting out previews for different classes and abilities out there. The battles can get a little crazy. Thanks again for watching. If you like the project, please support it on Indiegogo.